Justin, you are a Dynasty player. You play a lot, and you really enjoy it. We had a chance to hop on the phone just briefly today. Uh, what when you are starting a league, because that's what the focus of this is, and we're going to get into trades, we're going to get into the best way to make trades and things like that. But when you are first starting, let's say we're doing, not taking over a team, but you're just doing a draft, and you're doing a startup dynasty draft, what is your plan in the past, and what do you think is the best plan to do?
Yeah, so personally, my process is to just always go for it in year one. I'm a very competitive person. I'm that guy in the league that thinks every year is my year. But underneath all that ego, I do think there is some good common sense there. My strategy I can best describe as shoot for the moon. Even if you miss, you'll end up with a few superstars. Uh, Anyone who's won a championship knows your roster is very rarely built in the draft. Uh, Waiver wire is key in fantasy baseball versus
Mhm.
other fantasy sports that people might have played. Injuries will waylace your best laid plans, sometimes even in the middle of the draft. So make sure that you just focus on drafting a good core. Um, my personal strategy, I tend to be a bit more prospect averse than most people because I'm trying to go for it right out of the gate. So those prospects aren't really helping me as much. So I really just try and focus on building superstars, going for some of those older veteran players like a Chris Sale right now, that some teams that are maybe skewing a little bit younger might be leaving for me at a good value.
This is awesome because we play the game completely differently. Also, I want to say that what you just said about shoot for the moon, because even if you fall among the stars. That was my high school, on our high school yearbook page. You get to have like a quote, and that was my quote. Even
Oh,
if
no
you
way.
shoot for the, yeah, yeah. So that's super fun. I actually play it completely differently. That being said, going under the assumption, because part of what you brought to the table that is wise, Justin, something that really should be discussed, is sometimes if you don't know the people you're playing with and you're doing a dynasty league, sometimes it's going to fold within 3 4 years, right? So if that is the case, then yes, Justin, I think that's always the best way to go. Not always the best way to go at all, but that is a way to go to protect for that. Because let's say you're building for 2028 or 2027 or 2028, and then the league folds in 2027 or 2026, and then you've put money in and you've put time in, and it's very disappointing. That being said, let's go into the assumption that you're doing a league that actually is going to last. I have found great success through the years in building for the future. But this comes back to trading, right? And something that we're going to talk about later. I love trading. I love trading in fantasy baseball. And the part that I love about it is one, the build, but it's also the getting to know the guys in the league or the women in the league. Like whoever's in the league, I do trading a little bit differently than most people do. I don't really do emails. I do phone calls. So I get on the phone with people and I get to know them, and some of the people I've grown closest to over the last 15 years are people that I have been making fantasy baseball trades with. And, that's part of the joy of the game, is that you get to connect with people and get to know people. So just back to the best path forward in how to do it. So let's go into the assumption that we're playing with, let's call it a 15-team league. I don't like 20-team leagues so much, and I don't like 12-team leagues so much. I really kind of like 15-team leagues. So let's assume it's a 15-team league that we can really rest assured is going to last for a long period of time. I go the other way. I like to build completely with, for the future, and the way that I do that is the first couple of rounds. Let's say in a 15-team league, your first round pick, you want to get a young, and we'll talk about this also, bats or pitchers. I'm going to get a young bat always. And I'm going to get as many young bats who are actually playing in the league. Let's say, obviously, if Bobby Witt is available, if I have the second pick in the draft, Otani's probably going to go first, depending on the format that you're in. Maybe Bobby Witt goes first. But I'm going to buy a player with that first round pick that I know I can hold or trade for the next 10 years and feel really confident and comfortable with it. Once I get past that level, that's when I do go for the prospects. And one of my favorite things to do, Justin, is to figure out the guys like you who are in the league, and then play. I like to be an agent, right? I like to be like, well, Justin, you're going for it, and Bob, you're going for it, and Susan, you're going for it. So let's see which one of you guys is going to give me what I need to help build my team for the future, while you're going for the present. And so that is how I go about playing the game. So it's cool because we're going to be looking at it from very different perspectives on this front.
Yeah, I think every league definitely needs both styles.
Yeah, and that's one other difference. Sometimes you'll get into a league where there'll be three guys who are doing what I'm talking about, in which case that's not going to work because you have to be getting the top prospects in these earlier rounds, in the 5th round, 6th round, 7th round. So if there's three people doing it and you're getting one of the three every round, then I might zig instead of zag, right? And I might make an adjustment and say, all right, but if I'm the only one who's doing it, then I'm getting guys who are, in the 18th round, while you're getting a player that's very valuable for your team, like a George Springer. I'm picking up a Jace Colangelo or a Travis Bazzana might actually fall to that level. Roki Sasaki is gone. Like Sasaki's gone in the 2nd round or the 3rd round, obviously. But those other really good. And now, so here's the next question I have for you. When you're building a team, and you're talking about Chris Sale and picking Chris Sale, and you're not really building because you're going to play. So I think I know the answer to this question. Are you looking primarily to play with pitchers as you're in those 75 points, or are you looking for hitters?
I always like to have a mix of both. I think it's definitely awkward when you get out of a draft and you realize you only drafted pitching and your outfield's just in shambles. So you definitely want to make sure that it's balanced. But I do tend to lean a little bit pitcher heavy. Probably not too surprising since I work for Pitcher List, and a lot of my leagues there is a premium placed on pitching. So I think that sort of goes back to your earlier point about you have to know the people that you're playing with and what their style is, because it will definitely vary from league to league. In my experience, aces definitely tend to be a bit more expensive to acquire at the trade deadline. And if you can't get a deal done, it's much harder to try and overcome, say, second half Blake Snow in the playoffs by streaming off the waiver wire than it is a hot bat. Giancarlo Stanton may not be a popular target for a lot of people, but he's a guy you could snag off of your waiver wire in September of this year who could easily go on a power streak and help you out in your league. So I definitely do skew.
I want to ask you this though. So I tend to play in dynasty formats. I tend to play roto, but it sounds to me like you're playing head to head. Is that correct?
I play a mix of both.
Okay, which do you prefer between head to head and roto? Which do you prefer?
Personally, I do actually have a sort of a preference to head leagues just because so often I'm playing with people that I know so well, and nothing really beats that sort of rivalry
Yeah,
of
I get it.
having a grudge match against one of your best friends. You get them earlier in the season, they get you back, you meet in the
That's true.
playoffs.
That's true. That's it. It is a tremendous amount of fun. Going back for a moment to the way I build, I don't build around pitching at all. I don't want pitchers. Right before we came on, there was a talk again about there's no such thing as a pitching prospect. Nick was like Paul Skeens, and I was like, yeah, Paul Skeens. But when it comes to building for dynasty, it's just too dangerous. It's too dangerous to build. Whereas a bat, Manuel Rodriguez is going to get injured, but Andrew Painter, like there's a time to sell and a time to buy on these pitchers. I can't think of him. God, what's his name? I'm getting older now, Justin. What is the pitcher from the Blue Jays? Lefty.
Ricky Tiedemann?
Tiedemann, thank you. Sorry.
Yeah.
Tiedemann. Like if we look at Tiedemann was in a first-year player draft, I want to say 3 years ago, he was getting picked in anywhere from like 4th to like 10th, right? And we love this stuff, and we're very excited about it. And now Tiedemann is on the wire, right? Whereas you have someone else who was picked in that same line, who that around that same area, and I'm going to say Lazaro Montes was being drafted around that same area.
Yeah.
And now we're looking at Montes, and we're going to talk about a trade that you made where you got yourself some Lazaro Montes, which I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan of Lazaro Montes. But that's the issue, is that, it's like, what do I want to invest in? And because I'm not looking for, let's say we're starting a draft today. I'm typically, unless things, like I said, there's many people who are involved with it. I'm typically not going to be playing for 2025. I'm always going to be playing for 2026, because I'm going to try to I can get on the phone with people and find out what they want. How can I help you win? And what can I give you that I'm not going to then give to your opponent? Because my next call after you, Justin, I'm calling Susan, because Susan needs that same player. And you're going to be like, well, it was just kind of fun, right? It's like being a general manager. So you do 1 year, maybe even 2 years of this deep rebuild, and you make yourself a team that becomes a dynasty. Because at the end of the day, to me, not about winning one. It's not winning two. Winning five. That's where the camera is. I want to win 5. The only way you win 5 is building a team that is a true dynasty, is by getting these players. So I have one team presently that I share with Steve Gardner, where our outfield, it's called the XFL League. It's Ron Chandler's Dynasty League. So it's been around for a long time. It's going to be around for a long time. And our outfield, I'm just going to tell you our outfield from 2 years, and our team was pretty good. Steve had me join in on the team in 2020. Said, hey, I'd like you want to partner up? You know a lot about this dynasty stuff. I said, sure. So it was a pretty good team. It was like 5th place out of 15. And I was like, we got to tear the whole thing down. And he's like, what do you mean? I said, we're going to trade a $31 Harper, which with contracts, so you can up $3 a year. And we're going to trade a $31 Harper for a rookie, which then you can keep on a $3 contract as opposed to a $5 contract, Adley Rutschman and Andrew Vaughn. And as soon as we made that trade, everything else follows. Then you trade Yu Darvish for a first-round pick, and this, and you do this and this. Right now, I'm just going to tell you what our outfield is. Just using this, and the rest of the team is excellent too. And we've won the last two years. It's Aaron Judge, Julio Rodriguez, Corbin Carroll, Dylan Cruz, and Jackson Churio.
Wow.
In a 15-team league. But we got Judge in the first. It was traded Keston Hiura for and a draft pick for Aaron Judge coming off his bad year. And I was like, I'm a Yankee fan, and I was like, give me Judge in an OBP league for sure. Julio Rodriguez was a massive trade it was like trading 5 players and picks to a team that was in competition to get still a rookie Julio. Corbin Carroll came with the team, which was wonderful. Dylan Cruz was a draft pick. And Jackson Churio was a trade to a team that needed a shortstop. So we traded Carlos Correa for their first-round pick, which ended up, because of how if you come in second place, you get the first pick in the draft. That team didn't end up winning. That team ended up coming in second place. So we got Jackson Churio with the first pick. But this is what you can do if you're building for the long term, as opposed to, from my perspective, as opposed to, it's like it's like in business, it's like in life, it's like in love, it's like in everything. You're going for the quick hit, you're going for the long haul. I respect and I love the quick hit. I want to know who the quick hit person is, because I'll be on the phone with you as soon as the draft is over to say, your pitching is amazing, but don't you think you could use this? And that's one thing I would also do at times, is grab a couple of veterans. If there's not a prospect that I like very much, like in the 15th round, 17th round, I'll grab a Nolan Arenado. I'll be like, Justin, Nolan Arenado would look good on your team, don't you think? And you'd be like, actually, he would. And then all of a sudden, I've got your first and second round pick going into the next year, and I grab Jamer Candelario off the wire to cover that spot. And probably not. Jamer will probably be covered. But so that's the distinction. The difference. It doesn't always work. There's another league that I did with Brett Sayre many years ago, where we spent 2 years doing this. 3 years doing this, and then the league folded, and it was an expensive league, and we were really disappointed. So again, goes back to that earlier idea. So for you, it tends to be pitchers a little bit more than hitters. For me, it tends to be hitters over pitchers. How do you think? And I think I know the answer to this. How do you think about your farm systems, Justin?
Yeah, so farm system is something I find personally, it really sort of varies for me depending on the league settings.
Mm-hmm.
And if anyone out there listening is actually looking at doing a dynasty startup, I strongly encourage you. One of the first things you should be doing is going to your league rules. If you've got a constitution, which any Dynasty league should have. Go to your league settings, read it all, because chances are there's some really important stuff that you may not be realizing going into the draft. Do you have transaction fees in your league? I know you talked about playing in some paid leagues. I personally prefer to stick to free leagues, but know what you're getting yourself into. What's your fab budget like? Can you trade for fab budget in season if you need it? Because all this is
Mhm.
going to inform your draft strategy during the draft. If you're going to be making fewer trades in season, either because there are limits or because there's a real life financial cost associated with that, you're going to want to factor that into your draft strategy and be aware of what you can and can't do in the league. So I will say a lot of it definitely depends on what kind of league am I getting myself into. How much opportunity, like you said, trading is so important for dynasty leagues.
Mhm.
um, what am I getting myself into in terms of trades? I know it's redraft, but TGFBI comes up every year, and I know a lot of people that they're so used to being trade happy that they get into a TGFBI league where you cannot make any trades, and all of a sudden they walk into the draft like, "Ah, shoot, I shouldn't have done that. I definitely grabbed too few pitchers, or I grabbed, Royce Lewis and Max Muncy, and in a dynasty league that might be a fun pairing, but in a TGFBI league where you can't trade either of those guys away, maybe you should have focused more on your outfield or on your pitching."
Yeah, and the upside on TGFBI as opposed to, let's say, a draft champions over at NFBC is at least in TGFBI you can have fab and you can
Yep.
make pickups over the course of the week. But if you're doing one of those like 50 round drafts, which I've been doing a number of, I'm more relaxed with work, so I've been like diving back into fantasy baseball this year, which has been so much fun. Um, then you're kind of screwed because then there's nothing you can do. At least with TGFBI, you can always, or any of those leagues main event or any of those leagues, you can, if it's fab, you can make those adjustments. But so let me just put it out there, it's a 30 team, it's a 15 team league, you have 30 players and you have a let's call it a 10 man minor, no, let's call it 15. I like a 15 roster for farm systems. Do you think of those farm players for yourself as really just growing them as trade chips to eventually move?
See, I always like to draft players that I like. I never like the strategy of just purely going off of ADP and winding up with a guy that I'm not totally sold on, but somebody else is really high on him, and I think maybe I can flip him. Because as much as I do like to trade, it's always better to be trading assets that you're high on. I don't think you ever want to be making a hard sell where, if you're going on Discord or on Fantrax or something, you're sending, 1,000-word essay with every trade offer that you make. I'm not sure that's necessarily the best strategy.
No, it's
Um,
not.
but you definitely want to have excitement about the players that you're trading. So I always do like to find those players that I like, and I'm very excited to see um, what I can get from them over the next couple of years, as we'll be talking about a bit later. Um, but I wouldn't say they're just necessarily trade ships for me.
Mhm.
It's just something that I really think you sort of have to balance, like you were saying, how many roster spots you have there. Late in the draft, am I looking at, maybe I don't have those minor league spots. Maybe I'm looking at a choice between Braden Taylor and Willie Castro, who might be somewhere in a similar range. Personally, because I'm contending, I'm going to go for Willie Castro because
Mhm.
he's going to give me that value now. And if I do wind up in a rebuilding position, sort of like you were saying, chances are there's somebody in our league who's going to think, "Oh man, I actually have a couple of holes I need to plug on my roster. A
Blake
utility
Castro
bat like
cover them all.
that."
Yeah.
Yep, it can go a long way. So
Mhm.
I definitely think it, like you said, it depends very much on your league settings. I wouldn't say they're sort of valueless for me. Obviously, someone like Roman Anthony is a really fun target that, as much as I am building for this year, I'm not necessarily going to be shy on going for a guy like Roman Anthony because I know the value is going to come up very, very quickly. He could be a factor for me late this season and certainly for 2026.
Roman Anthony for me, gosh, I don't do. I used to do dynasty rankings years ago. for many years. I'm trying to figure out where do you follow dynasty rankings? Like, where is Roman Anthony these days on dynasty rankings? Would you say?
I think from what I've seen, at least, he seems to be either number one or top three right now.
No, no, I'm sure on the prospects he's definitely one top. It's him, Sasaki, he and
Oh, sorry.
Sasaki. No, I'm just saying on a dynasty list. Because like James Anderson's dynasty list,
Yeah.
across his dynasty list, Chris Clegg, I used to do it over at The Athletic before I did it with James over at RotoWire. And I'm going to say that if Roman Anthony were in the third round or fourth round of a draft
Yeah.
in a dynasty startup, man, I think I would take him in the third
Yeah.
or fourth round because the value of that, even I could make an argument, Justin, that even for you as a win now player, and because you are a prolific trader and you enjoy trading, that grabbing it was something you said that I disagree with is what I'm finding is that I think ADP matters a lot because I think it matters like what other people do feel about the player. I don't care. I mean, obviously, for players that I'm going to build around, I want to have guys. I want to have Aaron Judge on my team. I'm a New York Yankees fan. I have players that I've found through the years that I've won championships with, whatever league, and I want Cedric Mullins back. I'll take him at pick 260. I mean, he's going like 215 in NFBCs. But like, I want guys that other people want, because then I can trade them to him. You know what I'm saying? So like for me,
Yeah.
Roman Anthony at the tail end of the third, early part of the fourth, I don't even know if he gets that far, pick 45, 46. Where do you think Roman Anthony would go in a startup dynasty draft?
Oh, I mean, he's definitely inside the top 50 right now.
Yeah.
So in a 15-teamer, yeah, you're looking at
Mhm.
third, fourth round. But again, I'm not going to be surprised if somebody reaches to grab him in the second round either.
Second round. See, I don't think I would do second. Like pick 29, 28. Like let's say you got the
Yeah,
second pick, you took Witt, or probably Witt is gone. Is Witt first pick, would you say? Or is Otani
probably.
first?
But I mean, you could get Otani in there too.
Yeah, you could. You really could. And again, depending on the format, especially if there was a
Yeah,
format where you could use him as both at the same time, then he's one for sure. So
definitely.
let's say that. Let's say it's one of those formats. And then we'll put Bobby Wood at 2. And then it comes back to round 2 at 29. Under this scenario, do I take Roman Anthony at 29? I don't know. That seems
I think you're
maybe.
certainly going to be tempted.
I think I'd be tempted. I think I would be tempted to go 29 Anthony and then 32, not Pisana. Who else is at the top of these lists these days? Sasaki and Anthony. Who else is dancing at the top of that list, Justin?
I'm coming up blank right now, actually.
So
But I mean, you could certainly try and go like Sasaki and Anthony second, third.
you could, yeah. But I think I think that's the one thing that we're leaving out is I think that fun matters.
Definitely.
Fun matters. So does Sasaki even make it to 29? If I were taking Bobby Witt at 2 and then I could get Sasaki at 29, but I don't know that I would even do that, honestly, just again, because the pitching is so dangerous and he could blow up. I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't. I would go Anthony at 29. I think I would do Anthony at 29 and then follow that up. I forgot. I'm not used to hosting these, so I got a little bit off the tread there. Do you have anything else that we want to say about farm systems, Justin?
I think just going back to the point about ADP,
Yep.
I definitely do think that ADP does matter. Like you
Mhm.
said, it's a great way to sort of get a litmus test for your league and where other people value a player. I think for me, it's just more of I'm not going to be afraid to swing past ADP. If there's a player that I'm
Yeah.
really high on and he, like Roman Anthony, if it's a consensus, you take Roman Anthony in the fourth, fifth round, and I just grab Rossi Sasaki in the second, but I want Anthony in the third, then I'm going to grab Anthony in the third. And
Yeah,
I'm not going to be
absolutely. I agree with
shy
that.
about, oh, well, the ADP says I should wait another round or two because he's probably going to be gone by the time that I
Yes, he
get back to
will.
my next pick
He
in the
will
fourth.
for sure, for sure. But again, don't take Roki Sasaki unless you're. I mean, I guess you could take Roki Sasaki if you're. I don't know. Where would you take Roki Sasaki
I
on
think in
on
a
a?
dynasty startup right now, second or third round
Would you
in a
really?
15 teamer.
Would you take
Yep.
him? You wouldn't take him over Skeens. You wouldn't take him over Scooble, would you? Would you?
Uh, I I wouldn't, but it's certainly tempting.
I
I mean,
just
he's
have
still
this
only
like
23 years old.
I know, but there's like this bomb in his arm they keep talking about, right? Like there's all these little whispers. Like we look at Spencer Strider, perfect example. I love me some Spencer Strider. I remember when he was a
Yep.
reliever, he served me greatly in a number of leagues. I think it was 22. Was it 22 or 23? It had to be 22. Yeah, because 23. Right. So it was 22. And then I went all in and traded for him. We have him on the team. Steve Gardner and I have him on that team. We traded, I'm not going to say what we traded, but we got him. And everyone's like, that's the number 5 player in Dynasty. That's, we've got the Witt, we've got Judge, we've got Soto, we've got this, but Strider is right there. Out, gone, and gone. So that's why I like in Dynasty play or even in redraft play, I think I'm more apt to buy young hitters and older pitchers and just sort of guys who have been through it. So let's go to a trade that you made, a guy that like I kind of am a little bit high on this year. We're going to talk about the 12 team trade first, if that sounds good. So you're in a
Yep.
12 team. This is head to head, or is this
Oh, this is Roto.
Roto? Okay, cool. Cool. And you made a trade. I like this trade. I like this trade for you. I like this trade for them. But I actually like it a little bit more for you. You traded Garrett Cole, Mark Vientos, who I personally don't trust yet. I just don't. I don't believe in buying second-year players who had a really good first year. I just don't trust that. I just think that the emotions of what happens over the course of an offseason when you're one of the best players, then you're feeling good about your life, that then coming back in, you don't come in with that same drive. So anyway, that's just a general note. Garrett Cole, Mark Vientos, and a 3rd-round pick, which is a solid pick in the draft in 12 team. You're going to get a decent player for sure. Pitcher. I like getting pitchers in that 3rd round. And you got back Machado, Bellinger, and a unprotected 1st-round pick that is going to go into a lottery. Tell us how you came to that trade. Who offered it? Did you offer it? Did they offer it? And how did it come about?
Yep. I actually got back Max Scherzer as well there too,
Oh, nice. Okay.
which may or may not be worth mentioning.
It's worth
Um,
mentioning.
we'll see. But um, yeah, so that
Oh, that's
that
really
really
good
goes
one.
back to something that we've both been sort of hammering on throughout here. The biggest trade tip that I have to offer anyone is, like you said earlier, relationship building. Make sure that you develop those good relationships with the people that you're in a league with, because that actually happened to be a trade that was a result of a friend of mine who was very keen on getting Garrett Cole for me from for quite some time. I
Mm-hmm.
had some holes in my offense that I needed to fill, plenty of pitching to burn. So I felt, you know what? I think this is a good window to sell on Garrett Cole right now. I don't think he's washed by any
I don't think he's
means here.
washed. Yeah, no.
Um,
I don't think
but
so either.
I don't think his value is really going up at this point in his career.
I have
So
a slight beef on that. I think his value could go back up. I do, but I don't mind certainly with the value I think you received. And actually
yeah,
adding Scherzer into that is great to me.
mhm.
Like that actually makes the trade that much better. Okay, so go a little bit deeper. Explain how it went about and how you guys got to a final result.
Yeah. I mean, it literally came about actually as a result of some conversations in our pitcher list Discord,
Okay.
and we were talking about I can't even remember what, but something to do with Garrett Cole,
Hmm.
and Manny Machado's name was sort of floated out there.
Hmm.
He knew I was in the market for some outfield help, but
Hmm.
didn't really have exactly what I was looking for, and sort of threw Manny Machado out there as, you know, I'd be willing to add a little bit on top of Machado if we could get something for Cole and Vientos here. And I thought, you know what? That's really interesting because my need is at outfield right now. But overall, I'm just looking to improve my offense.
Hmm.
That's really the bigger need for me. If I can get a bat like Machado, I can't really turn that down. I need to be looking at that. And, I think
But what about
getting
yeah?
Cody
What about?
Bellinger.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. What about
Yep,
Machado? And again, I've already spilled my beans on how I feel about the player, but how it could be argued in a dynasty format by some
yep.
Like I was looking at I'm looking at it again. I actually what I like about this trade is it helps to keep the relationship alive, which is part of the
Yeah.
deal. It's like you're both getting stuff and it could work out well for both teams. And that's what you want. Like you don't
Oh,
want to win trades by a ton against people. I have had moments where
yeah.
I've been about to make a trade with somebody. I'm like, let me add a little something there. I'm like, why? No, no, I'm good. I'm like, I'm gonna add a pick just to make it balance out just a little bit better, which seems weird. But like you got to keep lines of communications open, and if you beat them down on a trade, they'll be like, I don't really want to talk to you about another trade because I
Yeah.
know how the last one went. But like you could make the argument that Vientos, some people would. Could you make the argument? Like I'm looking at this again, like Vientos Machado. No, I mean Machado's a better dynasty piece, but this year
Yeah.
he is in a year Vientos could be better than Machado. Like it is not
Sure.
impossible. Machado's getting up in years, and then it's
There's definitely risk
Cole.
there.
It's like, yeah, but there's also a risk that he's not anything, frankly. Is that
Yep.
I don't know. I you know, what's the difference between Vientos and Batty? You know what I mean?
I think that's a yeah, I think that's a tricky one, especially with how up in the air things are with the Mets right now. Is Pete Alonso coming back? Is he not? That could wind up putting the two of them in a timeshare at third base if Alonso does come back.
And then your trade looks real good. Then that trade
Yeah.
looks phenomenally good. Um, but it's an interesting this is an interesting trade. I really do like it. I rather like Max Scherzer coming back. I've been picking him
Mhm.
up in all my the draft champions that I've been doing. I've been grabbing him, and like every draft I'm grabbing him a little bit higher just
Yeah.
because I was like eventually he's going to sign, and once he signs that price goes up considerably. How do you think all right, I'm getting a little mixed up here. But how do you think Scherzer is going to do in Toronto? Because you took him as part of the deal, and that was
Mhm.
probably before he signed with Toronto, and you are in Canada for sure.
Yep.
Eh?
Yep. I'm definitely biased because I'm a Blue Jays fan.
Nice,
And I'd heard the rumors. I knew there was a good chance that the Blue Jays could be
nice.
getting him. So I felt, you know what? I'm going to take a swing here. Um, Max Scherzer is a guy that if he goes to the Blue Jays, which he thankfully did, uh, I think it's really interesting because the Blue Jays have had a lot of success stories with starting pitchers
Mhm,
over the last 3 to 5 years. So Max Scherzer coming to Toronto, there's not a huge demand on him either. He's sort of just going to be like a back end starter for the Blue Jays. He's not expected to be the ace that we're used to
mhm.
him being his whole career. I think it really puts him in line for a good bounce back season. And just as a Blue Jays fan, I think it's also a great move for that whole rotation. Getting a veteran guy, a future Hall of Famer
Mhm.
like that in there, to me also makes me just higher on a guy like Bowden Francis, who now has such a
Yeah.
great mentor in Max Scherzer.
Yeah, he does. I was looking at Bowden Francis. I like to watch film on the pitchers
Yeah,
and really like I used to play ball. I played high school ball, I played a little bit of college ball, and so I always watch pitchers and be like, how would I feel stepping into against in the box against this guy? Is kind of what I look at. Like does this look scary or does this look reasonable? Like I'm never going to hit anybody. Like there's nobody I can hit at this point. But and I was watching Bowden Francis. And a buddy of mine who I share a team with was really high on him last year. Were you high on Bowden Francis last year going into this year? We're going to get back to Dynasty, I promise. But this is
yeah,
interesting stuff. Get a little Toronto Blue Jays. And I watched what I want to say is I watched the no hitter or the almost no hitter
yeah.
against I think it was it the Angels, right? Was it the
I
Angels? It
think that's
was.
right.
I think it was the Angels. And then I watched him, and then the next start he did it again through 7 innings. He's getting picked around 220 in NFBC drafts. How real do you think Bowden Francis is? How where do you place him?
I've been buying in. He's actually a guy that I've had my eye on for about 2 to 3 years now. So I think it's a great player to talk about because this is sort of the magic and the fun of Dynasty to me is
Please.
that he was a guy I was watching in spring training in 2022, I think it was, that he made his spring training debut. And he had that big fastball and not much else. But I just remember sort of watching him and going, you know what? This is sort of interesting. Maybe I'll just sort of make note of the name. And I'm probably not even going to pick him up in any of my leagues yet. but I'll just sort of keep an eye out. And I remember a couple of days later watching another start, and Buck Martinez was talking about him as like, you know what,
I do
this is
like
a
Buck.
really interesting young guy, and
Uh-huh.
I'm a big fan of Buck.
I was
I'm a big
actually
fan.
I was in Toronto when I bought the MLB app because I was in Toronto and this is 10 years ago. And Buck Martinez, I'm watching on the TV. I'm watching Buck Martinez and I'm like, and he's got this kind of like funny voice where it's kind of
Yeah.
sounds like that. I just love him. I really enjoy him. All right. So Bowden Francis, by the way, Chris Bassett, dead or alive?
Ah, oh gosh. I I'm gonna say somewhere in between. I know that feels like a cop out, but I don't think he's completely dead in the water just yet.
Mhm.
But I'm also not going to be paying up for Chris Bassett right
You don't need
now,
to. I mean, you don't need
especially with
to.
Max Scherzer coming in.
You don't need to pay up for him. I mean, he in a 12 team 23, he'll be like the 23rd round pick at this point.
Yeah,
That's where he's going. So you don't have to pay for him.
yeah,
I got a sneaking suspicion Chris Bassett alive this year. Just a little
yeah. I know
sneaking
Nick always
suspicion.
says don't draft Toby's, so he's certainly not somebody that I'm going to be targeting in my drafts. If I'm walking out of a redraft league really unhappy with my pitching, I think he's a good late round flyer, and that's
I
sort of
just
where I
think
take
there's
him
a
right
chance
now.
there. I just have a feeling. All right.
Yeah,
So you got this first round pick. You got Machado, you got Bellinger, you got Scherzer, you got a first round pick. You gave up Cole and Vientos and a third. I do think I do like this trade for you. I do like this trade for the other team, depending on what happens with those players. With that first round pick, can you explain how the draft works for you for this particular league?
yeah. So it's a first year player draft.
Mhm.
This pick is actually a lottery pick. We are doing our lottery this week, actually. So I should find out in the next few days what happens. Roki Sasaki is available in that player pool because I know it definitely depends. My
Mhm.
other dynasty league, he is not. So I'm very excited to see where this goes now that I have two shots at potentially landing Roki Sasaki, depending on how that lottery goes.
So let me be clear about one thing. If you get the first pick in the draft, like you take Roki Sasaki there. The
Yeah,
only time I'm questioning a player like that is in the second round of a startup
yeah, for
dynasty.
sure.
But if you get Roki Sasaki versus Travis Bazzana, you're taking Roki Sasaki and you're taking the risk on it. It's just absolutely the way to go. What do you think? What is your favorite part of playing in this format? Why do you like or do you just play every format and this is just we're just talking about this one today? Or is this your favorite format to play?
Dynasty definitely is my favorite format. I'm the kind of person that I like to experiment with all kinds of different leagues. I know you and I were even talking about before we started. There are leagues that I've never even heard of still. There are so many different fantasy formats out there. I strongly encourage people try a bit of everything because that's the
Mhm.
only way you're going to know what you like. I know at Pitcher List we have all kinds of different wacky league formats, and there's always something new every year that somebody comes up with. But Dynasty definitely is my favorite, and a big part of it is sort of like I just touched on, being able to see the long-term payout of a guy that you've liked. Of
Mhm.
watching Bowden Francis at spring training, adding him to my bench just to see what happens, not expecting anything of it, and then watching him blossom into this player that all of a sudden I'm not going to the playoffs, but somebody who's playoff bound wants Bowden Francis in their playoff rotation. That to me is a big part of the appeal of Dynasty. And then also, like Lou even talking about, just that relationship building piece,
Yeah.
making new friendships with people, connecting, getting to know people. I always try and keep my trade offers from just being trade offers and working in some actual human conversation with the other person. Getting to know who they are, what's their favorite team, what's their favorite player. Oh, you're busy at work right now. No worries. What do you do for work, by the way? Just slipping in those bits of conversation where you get to know another person, to me is really one of the joys of Dynasty because over the years you really wind up making new friends, and
Very much.
especially for me up here in Canada, I now have all these friends scattered all over the United States that whenever I get the chance I like to pop down and visit.
Tim McLeod is my godfather in this business of fantasy baseball. He's the one who really kind of brought me into the industry many, many years ago. And oh boy, yeah, Tim, yeah, I know. He was so happy when we sent him the Christmas card. He's like, "You're off my Christmas card list this year because of a trade we made." I just want to look, I think, at the chat. Oh, there's Nick. Well, Nick, and so flags fly forever. Yup. Mid-save. I'm just gonna just look through this. Just wrapped up and boom, boom, boom. Nice to hello, Sean Shard. Thank you for hearing my voice again. It's a pleasure. Justin knows a Blue Jays player. Yes, Justin knows many Blue Jays players. Thank you to the last of Sambar. And also everyone who's watching. I want to take a quick moment to remind everybody, I'll be doing it after I do my bit today, to join the ALS fundraiser and donate at pitcherlist.com/PitchCon. And thanks to Nick Pollock and everybody over at PitcherList for doing this. It's one of the good things that the fantasy baseball community does, is what Nick is doing and what PitcherList is doing, what Justin Mason does. There's a lovely organization of human beings that come together and play this silly game that we all enjoy so much. And so thanks again to Nick. Fab. Let's talk about Fab, Justin. Let's talk about Fab, Justin. Justin, here's what I don't think people understand about Fab and Dynasty. It's really important, and especially at the end of the year. So I don't play fantasy football because I don't like it. Just don't like it. It's like too many injuries. I hadn't played in like 12 years, and I don't miss it. And I used to play football when I was younger, but I'm not a fan of fantasy football. So in August, like August 15th, when everybody is all excited about their real favorite sport, which is fantasy football. Not me, not you. There's a great opportunity in Dynasty leagues, I find, starting in August, all the way through the end of the year, where people aren't paying as close attention.
Yep.
Do you find the same, and how do you handle that?
Yeah, I definitely find the same. I know it's something I myself struggle with in college right now, because I know on top of fantasy football, you've got a lot of people, schools starting up again in the fall. They're going back to college and university, and all of a sudden, as much as I maybe want to be looking at dynasty trades and spend more time looking at dynasty trades than I should when I should be studying, your priorities do shift a little bit. So it definitely dips into my time, and I know other people's. But like you said, that window is a big window, especially with September call-ups.
Yes, sir.
And a lot of players on our radar that weren't on our radar. It's a very big time to keep an eye on.
Yeah, that's right. It's just a great time, and I think that it actually is a signal of how strong your dynasty league is. When you get to September, if people are still fighting and playing, you should be.
Yep.
You should be playing all year round. That's the most fun part about Dynasty, is that it becomes an all year round thing. I will admit, I played Dynasty for so many years that I personally prefer keeper leagues now, where there is some turnover, because if your team gets too good and you just keep, the league gets boring. But if there are contracts available, and I still look, I really enjoy being able to say that Aaron Judge has been on our team since 2021. We'll probably be able to keep him until 2029, until his price gets too high, or 2030, maybe we can keep him that long and no BP, and that we can get 10 years of Julio Rodriguez, or 10 years of Corbin Carroll. But as you continue to keep those players and those contracts go up in price, then the rest of your team has to suffer a little bit. Whereas if, let's say, the team I described that Steve and I have, that was just our outfield for the next 20 years, that's not a very fun league to be a part of, right? But the fact that now Corbin Carroll costs $11, whereas before he was $3, or whatever, and that's just going to keep going up, it gives everybody else a chance to build for their future. So I just wanted to say that is that I do think that there is. Do you play in any keeper leagues or any contract leagues?
Definitely not the sort of traditional keeper formats, but I know most of my dynasty leagues, we do have like a roster limit where every year you do wind up having to cut a few players,
Cool. Tell me about that.
trim
Tell me
from
about
your
that because
IL.
I think that's important. I think that the old way of doing it in the teens, the 2010
Yeah,
through 2020, every league I played in, every dynasty league I played in was pretty much here's your team. You keep it like the New York
yeah.
Yankees or the Toronto Blue Jays, and this is your team moving forward. And I just was like, this is just not fun. It loses its joy. So describe either one on the 20 team league that you're a part of or the 12 team league that you're part of.
Yeah, I agree with those keep everyone leagues, I think, do get a little stale at times, because I know like that 20 team league I'm in, especially, every year we have to cut 5 players, which doesn't sound like much. But over the last couple of years, I was just looking at this the other day. There's been some interesting players that have been cut to the player pool in order to get under that roster limit in time for the start of the season. I know just last year, a player that I cut, Joey Ortiz, went up to have a great season,
Mm-hmm.
and in a 20 teamer wound up being a player that
Mm-hmm.
I really regretted dropping, and actually wound up having a need at third base. So it really came back to bite me. Um, Things like that. It doesn't sound like much, and I know Joey Ortiz may not be the sexiest name for people out there, but it definitely keeps things fresh, and it keeps it from getting too stale. With you just keep everyone, and maybe you move things into an Excel spreadsheet to deal with some of those roster overages. Uh, I think one of the dangers of Dynasty is you can't get too overly attached to your players. You want to have players that you like. You want to have fun with the
Mm-hmm.
league, but you also don't want to get too overly attached that you either get into this sort of tunnel vision of, I don't want to trade anyone, or okay, this guy that should be on waivers is the only guy I'm willing to trade, and I want Garrett Cole back for him. It's definitely a tricky line to balance between having fun with it, having players you like, but also not doubling down too hard and getting into this mindset of, well, this guy's my favorite player, and this guy's my favorite player, and this guy's my favorite player, so I'm not trading anyone on my roster.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Also, I think one of the upsides of cutting it down a little bit is it forces trades, right? So if let's
Yeah,
say we're keeping of a roster of 40 players and I can only keep 26 of them, which is there was a league that I was a part of
yeah,
that was what it was. Let's say you have 30 players that are really good. You can do a 5-for-1 trade
yeah,
that anything that makes us have to work harder in the game, I'm all for. Anything that like the more love you put into it and the more attention you put into it makes you better. I'm personally a really big fan of. Okay, last we're running out of time, and I'm hoping Nick is going to join us because I have a question for him that I'd love to get his. So just tell me 2 players that you're excited about and 2 players that you are fading that everyone else seems to be high on.
yeah. I'm definitely going to go with a deeper cut for one of the players that I'm excited about, Ernie Clement, with the Toronto
Really?
Blue Jays.
You get to watch
Um,
him play.
he had a great season last year, especially defensively. I know a lot of people have been tying the Blue Jays to Alex Bregman, but there doesn't seem to be a lot of interest. In a month, I could wind up looking crazy for this,
No.
um, but it doesn't seem like it's going to happen, at least at the moment. It looks like Ernie Clement has that job locked down, or at least unless
Wow.
Elvis Martinez comes up and pushes him out of it. So he's already got the number one asset you should be looking for in a dynasty player, which is playing time.
Playing time.
And with a good glove, that should keep him at least in a platoon situation. And I'm not entirely sure if the power's as legit as it looked last year. I
Mhm.
wouldn't get too far on my own hype here and say that he's a 20 home run bat, but I think he's a guy that could give you like 12 to 15 home runs with, 12 to 15 stolen bases, which in shallower dynasties maybe isn't so appealing. But in deeper dynasties is a guy that I think a lot of people are really overlooking right now. So he's the first guy I'm really excited about right now. And then I know this name's been mentioned a lot at PitchCon already, but the other guy for me is Spencer Schwellenbach. I think that
Mhm.
he's a guy that is obviously starting to garner a lot of hype, but I think his value is just he's such a steal right now. I've been putting out a lot of trade offers in my leagues, and was actually hoping to get a deal done so we could talk about it today. Um, but yeah, he's a guy I'm certainly keeping an eye on, and trying to see what traction I can get there because I mean he could wind up being a top 20, top 30 starter this year on a really good Atlanta Braves team.